So, in this chapter, we'll be looking at social institutions, continuity, and change. So, in the previous chapter, we have learned about the dynamics of population in India, and now we are going to study social institutions. A population is not just a collection of separate, unrelated individuals, it is a society made up of distinct but an interlinked classes communities of various kind. These communities are sustained and regulated by social institutions and social relationships. Okay, in this chapter, we'll be looking at three institutions. Mainly, they are caste, tribe, and family. Okay, first we are looking into the caste and the caste system. Like any Indian, you already know that caste is the name of an ancient social institution that has been part of the Indian society or Indian history and culture for thousands of years. Okay, now we will look into it in detail. First one, it is caste in past and caste in present. Okay, caste in past. Caste is an institution uniquely associated with the Indian subcontinent, while social arrangements producing similar effects have existed in other parts of the world. In when we discussed about Europe, we saw the three estates. When we discussed it, three estates, uh, all these aspects. When we went to Britain, there was a monarchical system. All this social hierarchy was there that existed in the society. So, the exact form has not been found elsewhere. Although it's an institution characteristics of Hindu society, caste has spread to the major non-Hindu communities in the subcontinent. After all, we are all Indians. So, the caste system exists in Muslims, Christians, and Sikhs. As is known, the English word caste is actually borrowing from Portuguese word casta, meaning pure breed. Okay, and the word refers to broad institutional arrangement that is that in Indian languages refer to two distinct terms, varna and jati. So varna literally means color. Is a name given to fourfold division is Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Though this excludes a significant section of the population composed of outcasts, foreigners, slaves, conquered people, and others, sometimes referred to as Panchamas or fifth category. Jati is a generic term referring to the species or kinds of anything. Okay, it's a complete class of people. Okay, the intimate objects to plants, animals. It comprises of all the things from plants, animals, and human beings. Jati is the word most commonly used to refer to the institution of caste in Indian languages. So it is interesting to note that increasingly Indian language speakers are beginning to use the word English word caste. Okay, the precise relationship between Varna and Jati has been the subject of much speculation and debate among scholars. The most common interpretation is to treat Varna as a broad all India aggregative classification, while Jati is regional or sub classification, local sub classification involving a much more complex system. Okay, Jati is particularly associated with some village or some part of area or a region, while Varna is a country as a whole. Okay, country as a whole aspect is given to Varna. Okay, and most commonly cited defining features of caste are the following. First one, caste is determined by birth. A child is born into the caste of its parents. Caste is never a matter of choice. One can never change one's caste, leave it, or choose not to join it, although there are instances where people may have expelled from their own caste. Now, second point is membership in a caste involves strict rules about marriage. Caste groups are endogamous, that is, marriage is restricted to members of the group. Now, third is caste membership also involves rules about food and food sharing. Okay, and certain kinds of what kinds of food may or may not be eaten is prescribed. Who one can share the food with is also specified. Now, fourth point is caste involves a system consisting of many castes arranged in hierarchy or rank. In theory, every person has a caste. Every caste has a specified place in the hierarchy. Okay, this hierarchy changes when we go from one place to another, mainly for the middle class people. Okay, caste, middle caste people. Okay, caste also involves subdivisions within themselves. Caste almost always have subcaste, and sometimes subcaste may also have subcaste, caste within caste, known as segmental organization. Now, sixth point is caste are traditionally linked to occupations. A person born into caste could only practice the occupation associated with caste. Okay, do so that persons are hereditary, passed that occupations are hereditary and passed from one generation to another. Okay. On the other hand, particular occupation. Suppose Brahmins. Brahmins were in the earlier times also they were priests. Now also they are priests. Kshatriyas. The main duty of Kshatriyas was to rule or to fight wars. Okay. All this occupation was related to the caste. These features are the prescribed rules found in ancient scripture text. Since these prescriptions were not always practiced, we cannot say that the extent of these rules actually determine the empirical reality of caste, in concrete meaning for the people living in that time. Okay, theoretically, caste system can be understood as a combination of two set of principles, one based on difference and separation, and the other on holism and hierarchy. Each caste is supposed to be different from and is therefore strictly separated from every other caste. Many of the scriptural rulings of caste are thus designed to prevent the mixing of caste. Rules ranging from marriage, food sharing, and social interaction to occupation. On the other hand, these different and separated castes do not have an individual existence. They can only exist in relation to a larger whole, the totality of society collecting of all castes. Further, this societal whole of or system is hierarchical rather than egalitarian system. Hierarchical ordering of caste is based on the distinction between purity and pollution. This is a division between something believed to be closer to and sacred and something believed to be distant from or opposed to the sacred, therefore considered ritually polluting. Castes that are considered ritually pure have high status, while those considered less pure or impure has low status. Okay, as in all societies, material power or economic or military power is closely associated with social status, so that those in power tend to be of high status and vice versa. Historians believe that those who were defeated in wars were often assigned as low caste status. Okay, now we look at to the aspect of colonialism and caste. Okay, compared to the ancient past, we know a lot more about caste in our recent history. In modern history, if modern history is taken to begin from the 19th century, then Indian independence in 1947 offers a natural dividing line between colonial period, that is roughly 150 years, around 1800 to 1947, and the post-independence or post-colonial period. The present form of caste as a social institution has been shaped very strongly by both the colonial period as well as the rapid changes that have come around in independent India. So, scholars have agreed that all major social institutions and especially the institution of caste underwent major changes during the colonial period. In fact, some scholars argue that what we know today as caste is more important, more a product of colonialism. Okay, now we will look at how colonialism plays a very big part in determining class or caste status. Okay. Not all changes brought about were intended to deliberate. Initially, British administrators began to trying to understand the complexities of caste in an effort to learn how to govern the country efficiently. Some of these efforts took the shape of very methodical or intensive surveys and reports of customs and manners in various tribes. So, what happened? They began to categorize people in a recordical manner. It was written down. So, by far the most important official effort to collect information on caste was through the census. It first began in 1860s. Okay, census under the direction of Hart Risley was practically important and sought to collect information on social hierarchy of caste, the social order of precedence in particular regions, as to the position of each caste in the rank holder. So, what happened? This effort had a huge impact on the social perceptions of caste, and hundreds of petitions were addressed by to the census commissioner by representatives of different castes claiming a higher position in the social scale and offering historical and scriptural evidence to their claims. So, before this kind of intervention, caste identities have been much more fluid or less rigid. Once they began to be counted and recorded, caste began to take a new life. So, other interventions of the colonial state also had an impact in the institution. The land revenue settlements and the related arrangements and flows served to give legal recognition to the customary caste based rights of the upper caste. These castes now became landowners in the modern sense rather than feudal classes that claimed to produce the land. Okay. And claims to revenue. Large scale irrigation schemes like the ones in the Punjab were accompanied by efforts to settle population there. These also had a caste dimension. At the other hand, the scale towards the end of the colonial period, administration also took to the interest in welfare of the downtrodden caste, referred to as depressed classes at that time. Okay. It was a part of these efforts that the Government of India Act 1935 was passed, which gave legal recognition to the list of scheduled castes and tribes marked out in the special treatment of the state. Okay, this is how terms scheduled tribes, scheduled castes came into being. Caste at the bottom of the hierarchy that suffered severe discrimination, including all the so called untouchable castes, were included among the scheduled caste. Okay, thus colonialism brought about. So when we are looking into what happened about the influence of colonialism and caste system, all these aspects that we discussed now can be written in your main answer. Thus, colonialism brought about major changes in the institution of caste. So, we can perhaps say that it would be more accurate to say that the institution of caste underwent fundamental changes during the colonial period. Not just India, but the whole world was undergoing rapid change during this period due to the spread of capitalism and modernity. Now, we have done with the caste in the past. Now, we are looking at caste in the present. Okay, Indian independence in 1947 marked a big but ultimately only partial break with the colonial past. Caste considerations had inevitably played a role in the mass mobilization of nationalist movements. Okay, efforts to organize the depressed classes, particularly the untouchable caste, predated the national movement. Because even before the national movement began, these efforts were there, having begun in the second half of the 19th century. Okay, there were various number of reformers in both North India as well as in South India. When you come to North India, we have Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, Baba Sahib Ambedkar, and when you come to southern states, we have Periyar, we have Srinarayana Guru. All these important personalities were there. Okay, anti-untouchability programs became a significant part of the Congress agenda, so that by the time of independence was on the horizon, there was a broad agreement across the spectrum of nationalist movement to abolish caste distinctions. The dominant view in the nationalist movement was to treat caste as a social evil and as a colonial ploy to divide Indians. Okay, the post independence India inherited and reflected these contradictions. On one hand, the state was committed to the abolition of caste and explicitly wrote this in the constitution. On the other hand, state was both unable and unwilling to push through radical reforms which would have undermined the economic basis of caste inequality. Okay, think about a situation where caste is still prevalent in our society. It will be very bad. For example, appointments to government jobs took no account of caste, thus leaving the well educated upper caste and ill educated and often illiterate lower caste to compete in equal terms. The only exception was that the form of reservation in the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. In other words, in the decades immediately after independence, the state did not make sufficient effort to deal with the fact that upper caste and lower caste were far from equal in economic and educational terms. Okay, they were not similar, they were deprived of their opportunities. So, it was necessary for the state to give them opportunities. Okay, That's why reservation came into being. Then it is remarkable how resilient caste proved to be. Recruitment in industrial jobs, whether in the textile mills or Mumbai, the jute mills of Calcutta, or elsewhere, continued to be organized along caste and kinship based lines. Middlemen who recruited labor for factories tended to recruit them from their own caste and region to that particular departments or shop floors were often dominated by specific caste. Okay, this kind of activities were still going on. Even today, most marriages take place within caste boundaries. Although there are more intercaste marriages, while some boundaries may have become more flexible or porous, the borders between groups of caste of similar socio-economic status are still heavily patrolled. For example, intercaste marriages within the upper caste may be more likely now than before, but marriages between the upper caste and backward or scheduled caste person remain rare even today. Okay, that is a reality. Perhaps the most eventful and important sphere of change has been that of politics. From its beginnings in the independent India, so we are looking at the current state of casteism in the society, in the marriage. Now we are coming into there was even for job sector. Now we are coming to politics. From its beginnings in the independent India, democratic politics have been deeply conditioned by caste. While its functioning has become more and more complex and hard to predict, it cannot be denied that caste remains central to electoral politics. Since 1980s, we have seen in the emergence of explicitly caste-based political parties. In the early general elections, it seemed that as though caste solidarities were decisive in winning elections. Suppose you are standing as a representative in a particular constituency, and in that constituency, there is a vast number of certain kind of caste people, a certain sect of caste people, and they say they are not supporting. Your chances of winning is there a minimal. So, such kind of influence is there in politics for caste. Sociologists and social anthropologists coined many new concepts to try and understand these processes of change. Perhaps the most common of these are Sanskritization or dominant caste, both contributed by M.N. Srinivas, but discussed extensively and criticized by other scholars. So now we are looking at Sanskritization, or refers to the process whereby members of a caste attempt to raise their own social status by adopting ritual, domestic, and social practices of a caste of higher status. Although this phenomenon is of old one and predates the independence and perhaps even the colonial period, it has intensified in recent times. The patterns of immolation chosen most often were the Brahmin and Kshatriya caste. Practices included adopting vegetarianism, wearing a sacred thread, performance of specific prayers and religious ceremonies, and also Sanskritization usually accompanies or follows a rise in the economic status of the caste attempting it. Though it may also occur independently, subsequent research has led to mainly modifications and revisions being suggested in this concept. These include argument that Sanskritization may be a defiant claiming of previously prohibited ritual social privileges as the wearing of the sacred thread, which used to invite severe punishment, rather than flattering intimidation upper caste by the lower caste. So, dominant caste is a term used to refer. So, in Sanskritization, when we discuss certain practices that are only attributed to upper caste, or suppose say Brahmins, now we can see it becoming common even in the lower caste. They wanted to see themselves as upper caste. So, such kind of activities are increasing in the society. That is what Sanskritization is saying. Okay. Dominant caste is a term used to refer to those castes which had a large population and were granted land rights by the partial land reforms effected after independence. The land reforms took away rights of the erstwhile claimants. The upper caste, who were absentee landlords in the sense they played no part in the agriculture economy other than claiming their rent, they frequently did not live in the village either, but were based in towns and cities. These lands right now came to be vested in the next layer of claimants, those who were involved in the management of agriculture, but were not themselves the cultivators. These intermediate castes in turn depended on labor of the lower caste, including specifically the untouchable caste, for tilling and tending the land. However, once they got land rights, they acquired considerable economic power. Their large numbers also gave them political power in the era of electoral democracy based on universal adult franchise. Thus, this intermediate caste became dominant caste in the countryside and played a decisive role in regional politics and the agrarian economy. Okay, and this kind of caste people, caste societies can be seen in Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, all these areas. One of the most significant yet paradoxical changes in the caste system in the contemporary period is that it tended to become invisible for the upper caste, urban middle, urban upper classes. For these groups, who have benefited for the most of the development policies of the post-colonial era, caste has appeared to be to decline the significance previously because it has done its job so well. Their caste status has been crucial in ensuring that the groups had the necessary economic and education resources to take full advantage of the opportunities offered by rapid development. In particular, the upper caste elite were able to benefit from the subsidized public education, specifically professional education, science, technology, medicine, and management. At the same time, they were also able to take advantage of the expansion of public sector jobs. In the early decades of the independence, in this initial period, their lead over the rest of the society ensured that they did not face any serious competition. As their privileged status got consolidated in the second and third generations, these groups began to believe that their advancement had little to do with caste. Certainly, the third generation from these groups, their economic and educational capital alone is quite sufficient to ensure that they continue to get the best terms of life. See, once the independence came, there were only these upper caste people who were left out. They were actually not left out, they were the only people who had proper education, proper professional qualification. So, naturally, they were selected for government jobs and they ensured that their future generations were also enrolled into these jobs. Now, we come to the next uh, community or say sect, that is tribal communities. Tribe in a modern term for communities that are very old, being among the oldest inhabitants of the subcontinent. Tribes in India have generally been defined in the terms they were not. Tribes are communities that did not practice a religion with a written text, did not have a state or political form of the normal kind, did not have sharp class divisions, and most important, they did not have caste and were neither Hindus nor peasants. Okay, now classification of tribal societies. From the positive characteristics, tribes has been classified according to their permanent and acquired traits. Permanent traits include region, language, physical characteristics, and ecological habitat. Permanent traits. Tribal population of India is widely dispersed, but they are also concentrations of certain regions. There are also about 85% of the tribal population lives in middle India. Wide band stretching from Gujarat and Rajasthan to the west to West Bengal and Odisha in the central region. Okay, and in certain areas the concentration of tribal people are also high as 95 more than 60 percentage, especially in the northeastern states. In terms of language, tribes are characterized four languages. Two of them, Indo-Aryan and Dravidian, are shared by the rest of the Indian population as well, and tribes account to about 1% of the former and 3% of the latter. The other two language groups, Aztec and Tibeto-Burman, are primarily spoken by tribals who account for all of the first and cover 80% of the second group. Okay, and in terms of size, tribes vary a great deal, ranging from about 7 million to some Andamanese islanders who may number less than 100 persons. The biggest tribes are the Goths, Bhils, Santals, Orions, Minans, Bodos, and Mundas. All of them are at least a million strong. The total population of tribes accounts to about 8.2% of the population of India, or about we can say 84 million persons according to the 2001 census. According to the census report of 2011, it is 8.6% of the population of India. That is about 104 million tribal persons in the country. Now, after permanent traits, we are coming to acquired traits. Classification based on acquired traits are two main criteria: mode of livelihood and the extent of incorporation into Hindu society. On the basis of livelihood, tribes can be categorized into fishermen, food gatherers and hunters, shifting cultivators, peasants, and plantation and industrial workers. However, the dominant classification both in academic sociology as well as in politics, public affairs, in the degree of assimilation into Hindu society. Assimilation can be seen either from the point of view of the tribes or from the point of view of the dominant Hindu mainstream. From the tribe's point of view, apart from the extent of assimilation, attitude towards Hindu society is also a major criterion. The differentiation between tribes who are positively inclined towards Hinduism and those resist or opposite. From the mainstream point of view, tribes may be viewed in terms of status accorded to them in Hindu society. Often, when we look at tribal community, we see them as part of the Hindu community or Hindu religion. Okay. Now we look at the mainstream attitudes towards tribes. Okay, although the early anthropological work of the colonial era had described tribes as isolated coercive communities, colonialism had already brought irrevocable changes in their world. On the political and economic front, tribal societies were faced with incursion of moneylenders. Okay, we have seen this in our previous chapters. Okay, they were also losing their land to non-tribal immigrant settlers and their access to forest because of the government policy of reservation of forest and introduction of mining operations. Okay, and we can see in the hilly areas where the land was the primary source of surplus extraction. In these hilly areas, forest areas, it was most commonly appropriation of natural resources, forest and minerals, which were the main source of income for the colonial government. Following the various rebellions in tribal areas in the 18th and 19th century, the colonial government set up excluded and partially excluded areas, where the entry of non-tribals was prohibited or regulated in these areas. Okay, and mainly the colonials controlled the kings or head tribesmen to rule these tribal communities. The famous isolation versus integration debate of 1940s built upon the standard picture of tribal societies in isolated holds. The isolationist side argued that the tribals needed protection from traders, moneylenders, and Hindu and Christian missionaries, all of whom were intent to reducing tribals to detribalized landless labor. Okay. Now, national development versus tribal development. The imperatives of development have governed attitudes towards tribes and shaped the policies of the state. National development, particularly in the Nehruvian era, involved building large dams, factories, and mines. Because the tribal areas were located in mineral rich and forest covered parts, okay, they have paid a disproportionate price for the development of the rest of the Indian society. This kind of development have benefited the mainstream at the expense of the tribes. Okay, they lost their habitats, their home. Okay, the loss of the forest on which most tribes communities depend was a major blow. Forest started to systematically exploited in British times and trend continued after independence. The continuing private property in land also adversely affected tribals, whose community-based forms of collective ownership. The tribals considered forest to be home for everyone. It was not considered as a private property. Okay. The most recent example is a series of dams we built in Narmada, where most of the cost and benefits being flowed disproportionately to different communities and regions. Okay, tribal identity today. Forced incorporation of tribal communities into mainstream processes has had an impact in tribal culture and society as much as its economy. Tribal identities today is formed by the interactional processes rather than primordial characteristics peculiar to tribes. We can see people interacting, officers going to the tribal communities, distributing aid, distributing medicine to these people, okay, and trying to bring them to mainstream society, because interaction with the mainstream has generally has been on terms of unfavorable to the tribal communities. Many tribal identities today are centered on the ideas of resistance and opposition to the overwhelming force of the non-tribal world. Okay, another significant development is the gradual emergence of educated middle class among tribal communities, most visible in the northeastern states. This is now a segment of beginning to be seen in the rest of the country as well, particularly among members of the larger tribal communities. Okay, so that created a division between the developed class and other divisions within themselves. The different bases are growing for the assertion of tribal identity. Two broad issues are the most important in giving rise to tribal movements. These issues relating to control over vital economic resources like land and specifically forest, and issues relating to matters of ethnic cultural identity. Two can often go together. But with differentiation in tribal society, they may also diverge. Reasons why the middle class within tribal societies may assert their tribal identity may be different from the reasons why poor and uneducated tribals join tribal movements. As with any other community, it is the relationship between these kinds of internal dynamics and external forces that shape the future. So, the third aspect that we need to look are the family or the kinship. Each one of us is born into a family, and most of us spent long years with it. Usually, we feel very strongly about our family. Sometimes we feel very good about our parents, grandparents, siblings, uncles, aunts, and cousins, whereas at others we don't. On one hand, we resent their interference, and yet we miss their overbearing ways in which we are away when we are away from them. And families can also be a place of conflicts or violence or injustice, like female infanticide, violent conflicts between brothers over property, and ugly legal disputes are as much part of family and kinship in stories of compassion, sacrifice, and care are also there. Same way, these other aspects are also part of the family. Okay. Family is an integral part of our lives. We take it for granted. We also assume that people's families must be like our own. Other people's families must be like our own. Yes. As we saw, however, families have different structures and these structures change. Sometimes these changes occur accidentally, as when a war takes place or people migrate in search of work. Sometimes these changes purposefully brought about, as when people decide to choose their spouses instead of letting elders decide. So, all these things lead to change in the family structure. So, nuclear and extended family. A nuclear family consists of one set of parents and their children. An extended family, commonly known as joint family, can take different forms, but as more than one couple and often more than two generations living together. This could be a set of brothers with their individual families or an elderly couple with their sons and grandsons and their respective families. The extended family often is seen as a symptomatic in India. Yet this is by no means the dominant form now or earlier. It was confined to certain sections and certain regions of the community. Indeed, the term joint family itself is not a native category. Okay, and as I.P. Desai observes, the expression of joint family is not the translation of any Indian word like that. It is interesting to note that the words used for joint family in most of the Indian languages are the equivalents of translation for English word joint family. Okay, now we look at different forms of family. Okay, studies have shown how diverse family forms are found in different societies. Okay, with regard to the rule of residence, some societies are matrilocal, means after wedding they will be staying in the wife's house, okay, or mother's house, and they are patrilocal when they stay at man's parents' house. Okay, With regard to rules of inheritance, matrilineal societies pass on property from mother to daughter, where patrilineal we have father to son. A patriarchal family structure exists where man exercises authority and dominance, and matriarchy the vice versa. Okay. However, matriarchy, unlike patriarchy, has been a theoretical rather than an empirical concept. There is no historical or anthropological evidence of matriarchy, societies where women exercise dominance. However, there do exist matrilineal societies. Okay, societies where women inherit property from their mothers but not exercise control over this. Account of Khasi matrilineality. The Khasi community is another matrilineal society. There is a paragraph, there is a page full written about the Khasi community. You can read about it. So, this is basically what we learned in today's chapter about social divisions in society, caste, tribes, and mainly about caste, tribes, and families. So, I hope today's lecture was productive for you guys. Until next time, God bless you all. Jai Hind.